Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get started here. Welcome to the very last session of the 2019 IDF National Conference. You've made it. Congratulations. Welcome to a better future, the new role of the PI community in advancing research. I'm Christopher Scalchunes, Vice President of Research at the Immune Deficiency Foundation, and it's my pleasure to serve as moderator for our time here today. Before we get started, we have a few housekeeping announcements. But I realize if you haven't paid attention to this point all weekend, you're not going to do it now. So don't do what you're not supposed to do and do what you're supposed to do. See, I trust and believe you. So this is one of my favorite quotes. Doctors pour drugs of which they know little to cure diseases of which they know less into patients of whom they know nothing. Now that's Moliere. Well, you know, although that may be a little bit of an exaggeration, particularly given the outstanding physicians that we have in attendance at this conference, without the involvement of the patient community, which means you, nothing advances. So just for a moment, I want everyone to really listen to what I'm about to say. No new treatments. No new therapies. No cures. No improvement in our lives or in the lives of our loved ones. How does that sound? How does it make you feel? We need your help. Participating in research in its various forms not only helps us receive the appropriate standard of care for PI that we all deserve, it helps open up the future to better treatments, better therapies, more, better, and faster cures. The very beginning of the conference, John Boyle spoke about this being breaking down walls, about the fight. You can help us fight by choosing to participate in registries, in clinical trials, in surveys, focus groups. Your experiences, your history, your wants, your needs, collectively they become data. Data we can use in our fight as a sledgehammer to break down the walls John talked about. You know, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration understands this, finally. They now have an emphasis on patient-focused drug development, or PFDD. PFDD is a systematic approach to help ensure that patients' experiences, perspectives, needs, and priorities are captured and meaningfully incorporated into drug development and evaluation. The term for this is patient experience data. IDF has been collecting patient experience data for decades, and we welcome the FDA to our party. All of you can choose to be part of new drugs, new treatments, and cures. You can choose to be part of this fight. In about the next 40 minutes or so, we're going to explore and discuss the importance of your participation in research. For this session, we're going to examine 5 different areas of research that are important to our community. We have a distinguished panel to help us frame this discussion. We have Dr. Kathleen Sullivan of Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. She will talk about patient registries. Michelle Park of Takeda will chat about the role of people in IG therapy clinical trials. Michelle is a medical director in Global Medical Affairs, Rare Immunology for Takeda. Colleen Dansereau of Boston Children's Hospital will give us insight into bone marrow transplantation and gene therapy. Debbie Bensen-Kennedy of CSL Behring, here to my left, will provide perspectives gained through marketing-type surveys, focus groups, interviews, ad boards, and similar such initiatives. And then finally, IDF's own Tiffany Henderson will provide us with insights from IDF patient surveys. Dr. Sullivan, would you please tell us and talk a little bit about patient registries?
Wonderful study on complications of weight loss. So weight loss is something that's promoted by a lot of doctors, but it turns out the risks in people with PI are very different than the risks in the general population. And who would have thought that if the patients hadn't told us? There have also been some other studies that I'll just quickly say. Autoimmune disease and common variable. Bone health turns out to be quite different in people with immune deficiencies. It turns out drug allergies are more common. Who would have guessed that? There have been studies of cancer, food allergy, arthritis, and inflammatory bowel disease, and XLA. And then I know Tiffany is going to talk about fatigue. That's something that really came out of patient studies and was a focus from a group here at this meeting some years ago. So you can see the power of a patient registry, hearing the patient's voice, understanding what the issues are from the patient's perspective. It's been really transformative, and I wanted to list all of these because I'm not sure patients get enough credit for participating in registries. So I wanted to say out loud how important it's been and how much you've taught doctors around the country and even around the world. But the focus here is on the future. So where are we going? What can we do with this patient registry? And USIDNet wants to grow. It wants to look to the future. It wants to be valuable for the next generation of patients and doctors. And so in the next evolution, we hope to include genetic information and provide resources that will help patients who may or may not have a genetically defined primary immune deficiency, where it would help them find the optimal treatment. And so in the next iteration, we hope to include genetic information. And I'm really excited about that. I think it's the newest technology that has changed the lives of patients and the management, and I'm thrilled to be a part of it. So first of all, thank you so much for those of you that have contributed to USIDNet and PI Connect, and I really look forward to serving you in the future.
That was great. Thank you, Kate. Michelle, can you please talk to us about the role of patients in IG clinical trials?
Sure. So medicine has changed quite a bit, and how patients and physicians and companies are interacting is now changing as well. And this could be seen not only from patients having access to a lot more information than before, and in turn you're getting educated, you're in relationships with your physicians where you're becoming more of an active part in your care and being a self-advocate, as well as voicing these things that are important to you. So when we look at clinical studies, companies more than ever are looking to not just the experts out there, but also to yourselves. And without your participation, obviously, medicine cannot move forward. And a lot of things beyond just safety, efficacy, when we look at studies, are also patient-related outcomes. What's important to you? Missed days of work, missed days of school, how many times you're being hospitalized. These are things that are important to you, and these are becoming more and more important to us in these study designs, and so your voice does matter in these in the process of clinical study designs. So how do we hear the voice of the patient from the company? And just to tie in what Dr. Sullivan has shared, as well as Tiffany from the IDF, these participation in these surveys, in these groups, in these registries are critical. Companies not only utilize the work that the doctors are doing with these registries, but also to get insights on understanding your disease, what's important to you, what is this unmet need. So all of those participations into the registry, not only are they thankful for it, but we are as well, because this is really non-biased. It's a large data set, and where are you going to get this data set really then from these registries and surveys? So very, very important, and it all ties in. So it may seem very separated, but we all do work together to utilize the information that's out there. A couple of things I wanted to mention are the different kinds of studies that companies do. You are probably most familiar with the traditional standard clinical studies that are done when we're looking at new therapies, new IG products, maybe a new subset like a pediatric indication. But there's other studies that companies do. Some of those include investigator-initiated studies. Those are ones that physicians or other practitioners out there may have some patients of you guys that are in the office that say, oh, we're seeing a pattern here. How can we look at this subset of patients more? And they typically approach companies for support in furthering that research. Another important way that's growing in importance is real-world evidence generation. What does that mean? So after we have the product on the market, what companies like to do is to also look at what is it like in the real world. We've been able to put it in a bubble. We've been able to tell everybody how to strictly take things before, after, who's qualified, who's not qualified. But this allows us to see how it's happening organically. What's working, what's not, how can we improve it? And so this can be done in many forms, and these are also opportunities. And again, we absolutely reach out to not only our patient advocacy groups like the IDF, but also experts like Dr. Sullivan here to really help. How do we make this better. And that's always the first and foremost priority in mind when we're talking about these types of studies. And finally, the impact. So we've done these studies, we got the results, now what? How does this affect you? How do we bring it back to the patient? Many times these results are shared in many of these conferences, not only these conferences, but also national, international conferences. These get written up in articles. What does that mean to you? Well, it allows physicians to be able to utilize this data to help you get access. It allows companies to have this data, to be able to understand how we could support you and get you access. So again, I think the companies are realizing that, or they have known, but I think more and more so the voice of the patient is becoming more important, and also helping with the journey, not only from the time of having the need for your enrollment, but just way before, even when we're looking at what do we want to create, what does this community need, and how can we meet those needs. So that's where we are.
Great, some very thoughtful comments. Thank you, Michelle. So, Colleen, I heard you speak earlier, and I really enjoyed your talk. So what can you tell us about the role of patients in gene therapy and bone marrow transplant clinical trials?
Well, thank you for having me. I think truly, I feel like we're actually in a tipping point in therapy in general, in gene and cellular therapy, but particularly I think in the PI community, and that we're the newest kids on the block, so to speak. But we're built, and certainly we've built what we have and where we are in clinical trials in gene and cellular therapies. That's all based on prior information that was garnered from all of the patients that have come before, identifying what are the diseases, what is the, kind of unsequencing, if you will, the genome, so that we know what we can approach and what we can treat. So I predicate all this by saying that if not for all of the patients in the community who participated in the registries and clinical trials, we wouldn't have even gotten to the place where we are now to be able to do gene therapy for certain diseases. And that being said, we are in the early stages of that. But I will say, as somebody who's only worked in it for 5 years, because it isn't even that old, it's working at warp speed and breakneck speed. And so for me, as a nurse, and I think also as a provider, I think about this as what this means to you. And I think this should give you hope that these things are coming and that other therapies are coming, and people are really actively working on that. The other part that I wanted to say in relation to gene therapy and stem cell transplant trials is there's an overwhelming collaboration, not only in the immunological community, but the input that comes from having patients with PI enrolled in transplant trials and certainly in ex vivo gene therapy trials is there's an enormous collaboration with our hematology oncology community as well. So whether you know it or not, you're benefiting another group of patients additionally, because the transplant is a hematological oncology procedure. So I think all of those things, certainly we owe a debt of gratitude on behalf of that. I think what we would say, and what I, as somebody in the gene therapy world, would say for the future is that I would not only look for the patients that are participating in the trials, but other trials, ancillary trials that people have discussed, registries. Those all are so supportive to the greater good of all, because that helps inform us endpoints, things that we are looking for, patient-derived outcomes that are meaningful and will actually help us design better and stronger gene therapy trials that might actually get those therapies to market a lot faster. And right now, there's only several indications that we're treating, but the more that we learn from those indications will help us build for other indications in the future. I think that's all I have to say.
I liked it. I liked it a lot.
And I'm usually not a woman of short words, but I really do. I think that I can't underscore enough what I feel is hope. And I hope you feel that, or you can feel some of that as well. And that I think, and maybe anybody on the panel would tell you, maybe 15 years ago we never thought we would be where we are, with SCID, WAS, and CGD right now. And so I think that should give everybody hope that there are very, very, very smart people and patients really trying to push this forward in a very aggressive way.
Excellent. Thank you. Deb, please tell us from your perspective, patient involvement in other types of research, whether it's qualitative or your take and view on how they participate in research as far as clinical trials and getting products to market.
Absolutely. So I think that, all of, product development, treatment development, it starts, we say, is there an unmet medical need? And of course, in this area, that's the case. But unmet medical need isn't just that whether we're going to treat a disease, and if we can find safe and effective therapies, it's more about a continuous evolution of those therapies over time. And I think that the participation of patients to really give feedback about their therapy and saying, well, this is working and it's making my disease better, but it's difficult or it's challenging, or these are things that impact my day. So we have to look further into improving how we administer products, how the products may be able to change. And this is an absolute key area in which patients' involvement and that continuous feedback is necessary. So programs that we've been involved in, we reach out and we have patient advisory boards. We have patients come together and give us feedback. Hey, it may work, it may be effective, I may not be as sick as I was, but it's really miserable. This treatment is difficult and challenging. We can gain feedback across the pharmaceutical industry and understand how to make changes, innovative changes, develop our research programs such that we can improve products that already exist and modify them based on the feedback that comes forward. We also have patient questionnaires and looking at a research question in a bit of a different way, getting feedback from patients and giving a questionnaire, asking the same questions in a little bit different ways to really get quantitative and qualitative information from patients to make sure that we can make adjustments, not for just an individual that may say, well, this is a problem for me, but to really understand if it's a community-based issue and something that deserves more attention from that perspective. There are patient advocates that are in the community that also are able to go out and speak with other patients and really bring that feedback and insight into the industry and give this constant pressure test of what we're doing within our individual companies. Are we doing it well, and are there areas we need to change and manage? And in addition, patients help us when, innovations and new engineering and new changes are out there to really give us a test. The user testing, say, does this device work? Does it make sense? Apple does it. People check out the new version of the iPhone before it goes, and it's really critical that we do very systematic approaches to make sure that patients, the end user, have a good experience. And I think what's different about drug development compared to developing an iPhone is that people buy their own iPhone, whereas physicians are involved in prescribing products, and there's different steps that make the decision as to what products one should be using. So we really have to make sure that the physician community, the healthcare provider community is aware of how the needs are needed from a medical safety and efficacy standpoint, but then also taking it all the way back to the patients and to give us feedback in addition to the patients in a directed way to make sure that clinicians are doing that. So I think these are all very important elements. So though we ask a lot of questions, and I think everyone here on the panel asks a lot from you as patients to make things better, I'd ask you to please don't get fatigued of this research effort, but feel empowered and energized from it, because it's you that are able to help facilitate that change and bring better products to yourselves and to your community. So please, thank you for all the participation that you do in clinical trials, in product testing, in surveys, in registries, and giving us advice, because we hope that will translate to something better for all of you. So thank you.
Thank you. And And last but certainly not least, my survey research hero, Dr. Tiffany Henderson.
Thank you. Okay. So of the several federally funded health surveys that exist, none actually focus on the experience of individuals with PI. So the, what was that? Okay. IDF survey research helps to fill this void by serving as the leading patient organization for PI patient experience and treatment research. So if no one else does this research, IDF, we're the only ones that are actually doing it. So over the past 20 years, we have actually conducted more than 30 major surveys of patients and professionals. And thanks to all of you that have completed surveys over the years, IDF's research efforts have allowed us to be instrumental in achieving universal newborn screening, identifying discrepancies in patient experiences and clinical reports, aiding advocacy efforts for access to medical care for PI patients, and providing patient-reported outcome data to physicians and researchers to help improve patient quality of life in PI treatments. And so here are a very small amount of the results that we've collected over the past 20 years, so I'll just go over a few. So patients have reported, or 9 out of patients have reported that before they were actually received their PI diagnosis, they did experience repeated serious or unusual infections. So that was actually 9 out of 10 when we reviewed our data. Also, about 20% of participants reported that another family member had also been diagnosed with a primary immunodeficiency. And so here are a couple, our headlines, some of the articles that we've actually had published. So we've taken your survey answers, we've taken your data, we've de-identified it, and it's been put in a summary, so it's in the aggregate, so we don't know whose information is whose, and it has actually now become a part of medical literature. This information now helps teach other clinicians, it helps improve their current practice, and helps provide new directions for future clinical research. So in fact, IDF surveys have been cited over 500 times in numerous peer-reviewed journals, so I think that's pretty amazing. And I think this speaks not only to the reach of IDF survey data, but it shows the reputation that IDF surveys has. So thank you all for your participation over the years. So you may be asking if you haven't participated in a survey yet, how can I participate? What you're gonna need to do is you're gonna need to create a My Account. So when you go to our main website, you're gonna see a banner at the top, and you'll see the third link will say My Account. You're gonna click on that, and it's gonna take you to this page here. It's right now you see a list of all the different features you're gonna have access to once you create your My Account. It's really important for us that you create a My Account because we need your, of course, first and last name, but we really need your current email, your mailing address, and your phone number. Also, there's gonna be a list of different departments that IDF has, different features. We want to make sure that you opt into IDF surveys. So there's going to be a little checkbox, and make sure you check that off. Okay. So here are some examples of the things that we actually send out. So we have email, we have postcard, we have our e-newsletter, we also have the hard copy newsletter, the Advocate, and we may also use social media to promote our survey. So it could be Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. We really need your contact information because not only can we not send you surveys, whether they're online or through the mail or having to call you, you also won't even be able to see when a survey is ready to launch or if a survey is actually already launched. So it's really important that you do create your My Account, and if you have already created a My Account, that you make sure you're regularly updating it if you have any changes in your contact information. So I'm also going to use this time to plug some upcoming surveys. So this fall, we're actually planning to launch the first ever CGD survey. Not also happening in the fall, but then shortly after, we're hoping to launch our Cancer and PI survey. We then plan to do our 4th National Health Insurance Survey. And we're also interested in doing a survey that will focus on the different issues that affect the geriatric PI population. So again, I hope that you all, if you haven't created your My Account, you'll create it so we can get in contact with you, and that you will participate if you ever see an advert or an email comes up in your inbox asking you to take part in the IDF survey.
Thank you, Tiffany. So before closing remarks, I know it's the end of the day, and I know you probably have thousands of questions you want to ask us about surveys, but what we're going to do instead, I have a few questions for our panel here myself. So actually, Dr. Sullivan, you kind of answered my first question, so I'll just skip over to Michelle. See, I was paying attention. So Michelle, what can you please tell us about the time it takes for companies such as yours to bring a product to market from concept all the way through to FDA approval?
Sure. So, I mean, we'd all want to be able to fast forward the time and to bring more products to the market. But from the time to idea and concept to the time of actually getting an approval is about 10 years. Wow. It's a very long time. So just as an example, HyQvia, one of our products, the clinical work started in 2006. Now, this is after all the preclinical work. So between phase 1, 2, the pivotal studies, the application, getting all the sites enrolled, getting the patients enrolled, it was not until 2014. So that's 8 years from the time. So it does take quite a bit of time, and it's never over from just the acceptance and the approvals. We also further that on, again, by asking what are these needs, where are we still needing to be improving the product, and the study keeps going on. So while new products and new ideas are being in development. So it's a constant learning process, but it does take quite some time. So.
Thank you. So Colleen, can you tell us a little bit about there's a difference between patient involvement in gene therapy versus bone marrow transplant trials? And then as a second part to that, when might one consider a gene therapy trial over a bone marrow transplant or vice versa?
So gene therapy and the gene therapy in the PI diseases is ex vivo. So it's a transplant. It's an auto transplant, so which means you use your own cells. You don't need a donor. You're your own donor. And the benefit of that is you don't have to find a donor. And for people that don't have a matched sibling donor, then that problem is solved. And also because they're your own cells, the likelihood of you rejecting them or having graft versus host disease goes away because you're not rejecting self. So those are the benefits to why you would want to do gene therapy. The risk to that is that most gene therapies in primary immune deficiency still are experimental. I would say a lot of them are in late stage trials and getting closer to FDA approval. But that being said, it is still an experimental procedure. The reason to do a bone marrow transplant, on the other hand, is that if you did have a matched sibling donor, that is the standard of care. It has been the standard of care for quite some time, well documented. The outcomes are documented. But it has all the aforementioned things that I just mentioned as risks. So it is an allo transplant, so it's not you. So those might be considerations as to why you would want to go with gene therapy. And honestly, I think for the gene therapy piece, why you would do that over transplant is it's your assumption of risk, what your comfort level is for what you feel like is best, and you would know that best for you, yourself, and your child. Both of them are there is significant commitment in time, hospitalization, inpatient, and follow-up care. Substantial long-term follow-up care. Gene therapy has a 15-year follow-up period once we've altered your genetics by inserting the gene, genetically modified stem cells. And so that is a consideration, to follow somebody for 15 years is quite a substantial ongoing. So if you did that when they're 3, are you still going to follow them or 18, And so I think that some of them are very personal considerations. I hope that answered it.
I think so. Thank you.
Okay.
So Deb, from a slightly different perspective, can you tell me about any time in your professional history when patient input or experiences have changed either how you've developed a new product or changed an existing one?
Yes, I think that in our current programs, feedback, once again, this is more on optimizing a product. We were asked to improve, administration. How do we administer? Can we improve administering subcutaneous immunoglobulin, for example? And the feedback was, what's difficult about that? What makes it more challenging? And so we worked with patients very directly to get lots of thoughts about what could be done, what is most important. Is it about being able to move around? Is it about the time? Is it about clunkiness and difficulties? And so we were able to really compile all of that feedback and start engineering devices and prototypes of those devices to see, is this meeting your needs? Is this something that really provides a solution to your current problems? And so that's been an iterative process, but absolutely completely driven by patient engagement and really continuously giving us feedback to eventually get to something that we believe is going to be better and really help the patient in the administration of their product.
Right, and some of you may know and may have participated in these. IDF at various times has worked with industry to help find some of you to be willing to participate in these things, whether they're focus groups or what we call hands-on usability. So whether it's, and I'll mention them specifically. You know, a few years ago we helped Takeda with figuring out their infusion system for HyQvia, and even more recently we've helped CSL Behring find patients to figure out some potentially new exciting ways to infuse subcutaneous for them. So you guys play a very important role in these sorts of things as well. So thank you for those points. And Tiffany, some of you may also notice when you've received our surveys, I know you will always click open on the links when you receive our surveys. I know everyone here does. But when you do, a lot of you will read and see mentioned, and we do it all the time now, something about an IRB. Can you tell us what an IRB is and why IDF does that?
Yeah, so IRB stands for Institutional Review Board. It's a committee of at least 5 people from various backgrounds, and the purpose of them coming together is to protect the privacy and rights of human subjects that participate in research. So before you can actually start your study and you actually want IRB determination of some sort, you're going to have to complete an IRB protocol, which will include the background of your study, the method you're going to use, your sample, how you may analyze the data, and how you're going to share your findings. So once you submit this to the IRB, they have the authority to either approve what you've submitted, disapprove of it, or they can request modifications in order to either get your study to where it needs to be approved, or if there's something else that they just may need more clarification on. And they do this, again, to ensure patients' welfare and their privacy. And this is really important to IDF because we also care a lot about making sure your data is confidential and that we're respecting your rights as a participant. So this process from submission to actually getting your determination, and it also depends on the IRB you may submit it to, could take anywhere from 7 days. So I was being a little bit more, I guess, optimistic before, but it could take a few months. It just depends. It typically takes us anywhere from a week to about maybe 3 weeks for our studies. And that's because our studies are deemed to be minimal risk or no risk to the participants. And I also want to say it's really important that we submit our studies to IRB, and whether they need any type of oversight. I did leave that out before. Yeah. Sometimes a study may be determined that even if it's approved, they may need oversight. So periodically you may have to complete a report or so forth. But we really want to make sure that we've had an IRB review our protocols, because we want to be able to actually publish our work. And as I said, our surveys have been cited over 500 times. And they're citing things that have been published. So if we can't publish our data, we may be able to share it with you all, which is very important, but we really want to make sure we can cast the net as far and as wide as we can, and really share what we've learned from you all with clinicians and researchers, and of course, anyone else who's possibly interested in learning more about the PI community.
Very good, thank you. So we're going to close here in a little bit, but in the next few years, you're going to hear about a lot of exciting new and unique ways IDF is going to help lead the way in advancing research by those impacted by primary immunodeficiency disease. Together, we can build on decades of experience with our surveys, with USIDNet, with the EPHR, PI Connect. We'll collaborate with our healthcare providers, with our research and industry partners, and build exciting new possibilities into research for our community. But we need you. Sounds familiar. John said that, and it's the truth. We need you. At the beginning of this, I said some very scary things. And I said them slowly, and I want you to hear something slightly different this time. Listen carefully. New treatments, new therapies, new cures, better lives. How does that sound? How does that make you feel? I'll take a woo. Say it with me. New treatments, new therapies, new cures, better lives. This is a fight. This is our war cry. Come on, I know it's the end of the day, one last time, or we're not going to leave here. New treatments, new therapies, new cures, better lives. Excellent. Now, thank you. Now, remember that, and remember the next time you receive an email from IDF, a call from us, you read an article about participating in some form of research, we need you to respond. We need you to remember and think about our battle cry. One last time, what is it? New treatments, new therapies, new cures, better lives. Excellent. Thank you for your time. It's been my privilege to speak with you today. I look forward to seeing all of you in 2 short years. Stay tuned, because right here, we're doing our farewell ceremony. Thank you very much.